Were were your men ever attacked by mortars or rockets? Did you have that fear of incoming?
Yep, yep. We, especially at An Locke, a place called An Locke, it was in the news a lot at the time. In April of '72, we were, An Locke was a short field, it was 2,500 feet long, which is minimum for C-130. And we were flying in there at night, delivering whatever the goods were, ammunition, food, that sort of thing, and whatever else. Who knows what we were carrying half the time. We would make the approach. They had a lighting system set up so that you could tell whether you were on the glide slope or not. You don't want to come over the threshold of the runway and you're 80 feet high. You want to be 20 feet high. The higher you are, the further down the runway you land, and less distance you got to stop. And you had minimal distance to start with on a 2,500-foot strip. So we had a lighting system set up called a Visual Approach Slope Indicator, a VASI. And it had used colored lights to show you certain combinations. White over red, you were on glide slope. Red over red, you're low. White over white, you're high. So you want white over red. They had that set up, and we'd come down the glide slope, minimal speed, hit the ground, roll to the end of the runway. As we were turning the airplane around, the loadmaster would lower the cargo door down to horizontal and open up the back of the airplane and release the locks on the pallets that we were carrying. We would accelerate when, on his say-so, roll about 100 feet and basically run out from under the load. The load would move fairly easily with the locks released, so we just zoom forward and leave the load where it was, and it would drop onto the runway. And then they'd come out with forklifts and get the stuff before the next plane landed. Well, at An Locke, we'd take mortars when we landed. They would love to hit a C-130. It's the biggest airplane in Vietnam. So the mortars would start coming in once we're on the ground. And we had to get out of Dodge as soon as we could. Once the loadmaster called that the load was all clear, we'd go for takeoff power while he was closing up the ramp. If you rotate the airplane with that ramp down horizontal, it'll strike the ground and force the nose back down. Don't want that. So we go roaring down the runway, and as we were accelerating, he'd be closing the ramp. He'd call ramp up, and we could rotate the airplane. Didn't know what they call the V speeds, didn't know what the V speeds should be. Refusal speed, takeoff safety speed, climb speed, engine out climb speed. Didn't know what those speeds were because they vary with your weight. Didn't know what our weight was because we would typically, after we unloaded the cargo, of course, the engines are running, the cargo doors open, refugees would come by the hundreds from every direction, running under the props. They were just short enough so they'd miss those props by about that much. Those props are out there doing 600 RPM, and they take your head off in a second. They would just come in droves and load up as many as they could get in that airplane. Nothing orderly about it. They're just piling in.
So are you talking about during when you said 1972, right? So when did you leave? Just when's your beginning and end dates?
I was there from July of 71, from June of 71 through July of 72.
So in 72, refugees were trying to board airplanes. Mm-hmm. Okay, wow, that's interesting.
And I didn't know how many people we had on board. We had them 2 layers deep, I think. I didn't know what the weight was. We'd just go roaring down the runway, and when we were just about to run out of runway, I'd rotate the airplane, get it off the ground, fly it in ground effect. Ground effect is a phenomenon for fixed-wing aircraft. Whatever the wingspan of the airplane is, half of that, if you're not any higher than that, like we had like 100 and something foot wingspan. So from 50 feet down to the ground, the wing would actually compress the air, and you could fly at a lower speed. So we'd get it off the ground, level it out, flying ground effect until we ran out of runway, and accelerating in the meanwhile, and then climb on out. And it's dangerous like anything, but we got the people out of there.
Do you know what happened to the refugees after that?
Never knew. No, we'd get back to Saigon, and they'd come out of the airplane by the dozens, and who knows where they went. Or
So they were just trying to make it to Saigon.
yeah, just trying to get out of the fighting area.
Wow.
There were all kinds of battles going on around An Locc at that time.
Sure.